recording, then you can feel free to drop and then just watch the recording later. We do plan on having this shared with Adobe. They're going to share it out on their YouTube channel as well. And if you have any questions or if you want to discuss anything, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Madan, who's also on the call. And there's another email here for advocacy@adobe.com that you can reach out to. Okay, so the next thing, just a couple of more sort of housekeeping rules that we've got. So, this is, obviously a community, right? We're here to learn from each other. We're here to, sort of have a safe space, network, talk about the things that we, sort of gathered from the summit session that happened last week. We're not looking to do sort of promotions or pitching or sales or anything like that. Don't reach out to anybody unless, they consent to, being reached out to. And then, just make sure that you don't share anything, without somebody's consent as well. So, just a couple of sort of group house rules there. Okay, so let's do quick introductions here. So tell us what you do. Tell us also what what you thought was your either favorite session or favorite sneak at Adobe Summit. And I'll start with you, Tad.
Hey, Tad Reeves. I'm a principal architect at Arbory Digital. Been in the AIM space since CQ52, so 2010-ish. So yeah, I do a lot of AM DevOps architecture work, and this is my seventh or eighth, something like that summit going this year. But as far as my favorites, it's usually the top AM features, which is my favorite. But I think this year it was probably keynote day 2. I really enjoyed the keynote speakers quite a bit. I think that they did a great job. So the tough thing about all the AI focus, we'll talk about AI on this meeting a lot, but the tough thing about the AI focus is making it practical. And I thought that the folks that they got did a good job of making it practical and not making it just kind of rainbows and foo-foo. So there's my unconventional answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted. Robert?
Hey, everyone. My name is Robert Sumner. I'm a principal consultant here at Perficient, and I am been with the company for 20 years. I've been working with AEM and other products within the technology stack of Adobe for about 15 years. And my favorite session was actually day 1 speaker, keynote, the Coca-Cola session. I thought was interesting just because I think the brand of how iconic it is, and it's a great marketing use case just all the way around, and how they continue to have dominance in the market, I thought was interesting. And even them having to react in ways that, to moving from traditional brand marketing to, some of the elements around just standard digital marketing has been just fascinating to me. So I really enjoyed that session.
Awesome.
Today.
Thanks, Robert. Jim, how about you?
Hello, everyone. Jim Vogel here. I'm a VP of Adobe Technology Solutions at Bounteous. I have worked and partnered with some of you on this call for a decade or more, which is a real pleasure to see some of you again. Following up on Tad, I think I've been going to Summit since 2011 or so. I had 4 or 5 under my belt in Salt Lake before they moved it. So been around Adobe for a very, very long time. As far as favorite sessions, I only got to see a few between customer and booth commitments, but selfishly, my favorite was one that Bounteous actually did, which was for Seven Brew, a coffee company in the Southeast, where we moved all of their disparate technologies onto Adobe, including a franchise model using edge delivery services and doc authoring. Each of their franchisees, when they're given permission, could go up and modify their own content. So really a good use case of how AEM can be used. And being an AEM user group, I thought it would be a good one to bring up. Very nice to see everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. And I'm Raf Winterpacht. I'm with Perficient. I've been doing Adobe things for, since CQ 5.4, I want to say. Been through a number of implementations of things like migrations, and been working with edge delivery services for a bit now. A lot of exciting stuff that came from Summit, obviously. So let's do this. Let's get right into the panel topics. So give me just a second here and get to the next slide. Okay, so the panel discussion. So I'm going to turn off sharing here temporarily because we're going to have people speaking. So give me a second to do that. Okay, so first question I have. So Jim, question for you. Last year, they had a big promise of personalization at scale. So do you feel like Adobe has delivered on that, or do you think they still have some polishing to do there? What are your thoughts about that, given that that's been a theme for the last couple of years?
My top line would be it's still a little bit of work to do. I've sat in several Adobe presentations and pitches in the past few months where personalization at scale is the actual topic. So they're playing up the different products that are involved in personalization and the data and the AI. But I think while they're advancing, I don't think they quite have it all down yet. Some of the advancements I've seen is data and journeys, and some of the back office work of personalization at scale has always been there. It's been there for a few years. But the variations and the content authoring at scale has such a heavy reliance on AI, and companies are just not quite ready for that yet, for generational AI. And I think that's what Adobe has to break through. And I'm not sure if that's a standard AI policy that somehow Adobe consults with their customers, or we do, to say AI is safe to use in these circumstances, or at least making progress there, because I think that's the blocker. They also announced Brand Concierge, and if its promise is true, and because it's year one, I'm sure adoption will be low. But if it really can deliver on those promises of comparisons and recommendations and routing customer inquiries to the right channel, I think that could be a game changer in personalization as well. So not quite there, but they're doing a good job.
Okay, great insight, Robert. What do you think? What do you think where do you think they're at with their promise of personalization at scale? You're on mute.
I think that has been the theme for, it seems like, the last 6 or 7 summits. And while the capability to be able to personalize and or do that at scale was something that they would tout as a capability, most organizations didn't have nearly the size, shape, breadth, or depth to be able to do it. So of course, we're all excited about the prospect or the opportunity of GenAI entering into that equation now. And so that's exciting. We're doing a lot of warning of our customers that GenAI is, it shouldn't be the first place that you're looking to go and, support personalization at scale. In other words, maybe some investment around intelligent search for the assets that you do have inside your repository should be a first step. Maybe the prompt should first, be intercepted before it hits the generative AI response, to first then say, you already have what you're asking for. Would you like to use it? Would you like to browse it and choose? I see that happening specifically in the asset space, not on the copy space, because of the way that's been mostly modeled in the systems. It's difficult to understand where copy is separated from assets sometimes. But it is exciting to see now that the true enablement of GenAI and what that might bring for folks that are trying to achieve personalization at scale is exciting. I still think, though, that there's an ROI discussion to be had, to be honest. So, how far down the personalization at scale path do you go before you're truly doing individualization at that point? And, that's not a human problem at that point. It's completely has to be driven through automation and through because you're not going to have generative assets for every individual specific tailored response to a Robert and to a Jim and to a Tad and to a Raf, right? It's still lookalike, it's still segmented. So you have to be strategic, you have to be targeted. I think that's where customers, there's a bleeding line between what's truly personalization at scale versus what's really individualization. So those are also some topics that I continue to have with our customer base when we are starting to talk about that capability.
Yeah, great. Anything to add to that?
I'd echo a lot of what Robert was saying, especially the first part, Robert, when you're talking about the personnel involved, because I feel like that is a lot of times the stumbling block, because sometimes you have people that have been stretched so thin just trying to get their basic experiences out the door, that you then say, well, how about personalizing this? And they're already just trying to handle all the basics of their marketing engine. And the personalization then ends up getting reduced to this kind of reductio ad absurdum of like these billboards that you see, where it's like, hello, Portland, don't you like these cigarettes? You're like, oh, wow, I super feel personalized. You spoke directly to me because you know the name of my city before you put the billboard up. Like it's not real personalization, but sometimes without enough marketing muscle and brain cells that you can put at that personalization and individual responses for things, then it just becomes shock, really. Kind of like these LinkedIn responses that you get all the time that you're like, I can tell that a GPT wrote that and it's terrible and I'm not going to respond. And it doesn't resonate with customers. But like you were saying too, Robert, the less flashy places that you can put it, like asset location, like semantic search and so forth, like a lot of that stuff doesn't sound as flashy, but it's sure useful.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit now too from generative AI. So Tad, question for you. There's obviously so many ways now that you can author experiences within either AEM or documents or document authoring, universal editor, AEM is a cloud service, right? So based on these different summit sessions and word on the street, or whatever some of the other conversations that you've had, what do we need to consider as far as addressing some of those needs for people? Do we, recommend certain things based on what they have? Is it always, it depends? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Okay, yeah, I think it's always going to be, it depends. I don't think that answer is ever going to go away. But that being said, I think there's a lot of cohesion kind of starting to happen. And it wasn't really there last year, because a lot of the framework of how you would launch a site on edge delivery, and even just getting over customer perceptions that edge delivery is only for blogs, because there was that line that people were like, this is just for dinky sites. And Adobe had to come out there last year saying, yo, we've got very big sites right now. We've got .com running on edge delivery. This is not a blog. This is like robust functionality. You can put anything you want on this stuff, as long as it's not, there's a couple spaces where you can't right now. Things like, FedRAMP. There's some things where you got data residency concerns where, hey, this stuff has to stay in this one place. Yeah, fine, that doesn't work really well. But most other cases where I people, Robert, like you and me, who would have given it the thumbs down, you don't have to give it the thumbs down anymore. You know what I mean? It is a valid, and it's all about like, good. Well, do you care about going really fast? Like, should it be Lighthouse 100? Great. Okay, cool. Do you care about the fastest authoring experience? Do you care about the fastest development experience? Great. Then you want to be on this, and you don't necessarily want to be on a traditional dispatcher publisher setup anymore, because that is not the fastest way to get content out. It's not the fastest way to develop on anymore. It's got a lot of advantages. All of us on this call, we built our entire careers around, or a lot of our careers around pushing content out with that model. But it's I think it has reached a maturity level that I don't think anybody needs to shy away from it now. But your question, Ref, was on authoring surfaces. And I think that's one also where there's a little bit more cohesion, a little bit more of a message that you can kind of take and run with, because you've got so the traditional way of getting edge delivery stuff out before was you have Google Docs, you've got SharePoint, and then as of Summit and shortly after Summit, you also had Crosswalk, which is your universal editor, and then there's a new player on the scene, which is doc authoring, or DA, formerly known as Dark Alley. And there's a lot of kind of cohesion that has now come from that as well, because now you've got, and if you were in any of the labs about Commerce Cloud Service, which also was released at Summit this year, you've got basically on a universal editor or doc authoring, you can do the same with the same project. So you can just basically choose what experience you want. Like, do you want a doc-based experience where it's like super fast to author on, super fast to get stuff out, low maintenance for your blocks and stuff like that. Good, you just go with doc authoring. Do you need a guided, like a much more guided experience? And that's what you want to go with, where your users are guided on what fields that they are meant to do. It takes more instrumentation. It's more maintenance, but it's a lot more prescriptive. And there's personas that prefer that experience. You can do that with Universal Editor. Both of them no longer require any architectural decisions to be made ahead of time. Because previously it's kind of a checkmate if you did one. If you said, oh, we just got everything, we just did this massive migration, got everything into the JCR and it's serving out doc stuff, you're like, well, it'd be better if you did it just regular doc style. I mean, shouldn't you have done that? Then you're like, oh, well, glad I just invested $1 million putting it all into the JCR. Like, so you don't have to make those decisions ahead of time right now, which is really nice. So that part is super, super exciting. And both of them are I think light years faster than operating off of your old page editor in AEM. So again, it's not for everything. You know, if you're doing something for some government agency, you're probably not going to be able to pitch them an edge delivery project right now. But for everything else, it's going to speed stuff up. And I think back to what Jim was talking about, I think this is going to, if you can make those projects faster, you can dig into personalization. You can dig into some of the other stuff that you just haven't had time for or budget for.
Yeah. Robert, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, that was a lot, obviously.
That was a lot, and I will say, like, I am a big fan of the technology. I think it does suit more modern development community, which are the people that are really pushing to move towards that. And of course, that also means that there are some concessions that the marketers have had to make, you know, up until this point, where now with right instrumentation, Universal Editor can become a reality that looks and feels more like and looks more and more like we're not moving backwards in time, right? Where we're true inlines, true what you see is what you get. And there's some, to your point, a portion of the audience that requires that. So that part's exciting. But the practical nature of when someone says, what should I do? It's like, well, what's your point of view? Is it technology, move fast? Okay, then yeah. Oh, money's not an object and time's not an object, because this is a rewrite, right? And oh yeah, well, Adobe didn't tell me it was a rewrite. Well, no, they're not telling you that it's a rewrite because it's almost sold as an extension of AEM. AEM as a cloud service. You just move to AEM as a cloud service and then you get edge delivery. And next thing you know, people are saying, what do you mean I got to rewrite on my application? I don't understand. I'm rewriting my application. This is a big endeavor. So there are some practical parts to that, where how you crawl, walk, run into those solutions. Maybe it's not, I take my .com all the way to edge delivery right away. Maybe it is, I carve out portions of the site as I mature into that solution. So there is a recipe. There potentially might be a recipe for success or a roadmap for success that I think when we talk to our more mature customers who've been on AEM for a really long time, there's some education that has to happen there. And I say some practical consulting advice, if that makes sense.
Yep. I agree.
Jim, anything you want to add to that too?
Just a little storytelling. It's we currently have a client who we put on AEM. It was still as a cloud, but it was traditional authoring last Q1, 2024. They now have to redo their whole brand, change their name and stuff, but they want to keep every single feature they have. But Adobe sold them an edge delivery. So they want to keep their features and just change the presentation layer and get edge delivery at the same time. And backing up what Robert said, is it's been a tough education to explain that is basically a greenfield AEM now. We have to start over. We can migrate existing content, sure, but it's a reauthor and a rebuild, and then a decision of Universal Editor or doc-based authoring and other decisions to make. And we really have to do better at educating our clients on what their options are, try to prevent them from going down a predetermined path, whether that's from an Adobe salesperson or our own salespeople. We have to get better at consulting to the right solution here. And you can do a performance site without edge delivery. It's not as easy, and there's a lot of perfection to your code and your authoring, but we have to educate them better. Even though I do believe edge delivery should be the first choice, there should be reasons not to use it rather than looking for reasons to use it.
Great point. Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's shift over to the next question. We've got a pretty good number of questions left, and we're 25 minutes in, so I want to make sure we get through these. So Robert, we talked about this a little bit earlier. So GenAI, we think, is now a bit more matured. It's not really so much of a novelty, but we think there's still some angst amongst marketers and organizations in fully embracing it, right? So what's our message? What's our messaging to them? How do we help them address that?
Well, this is not I guess this is a generalistic question, right? Because it's not necessarily pointed at Adobe and the use of Gen AI inside of Adobe. It's AI in general. And even myself, like you jump into the waters, you get a little trained, you build your first RAG app, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. I am now well armed, to find out 3 weeks later that, there's now 13 other models that have come out. And now just yesterday, I saw a new advancement in video AI that was just unbelievable. You truly cannot detect that they're not human beings on the other end of that lens. And so I think there's some trepidation for that overall fear general of Gen AI in general. I think when I read the stats that say there is an outlook of can't wait to use these things when things just settle down, it's just things are growing and changing so fast that it's hard for human beings to keep up, to be honest, and to it is almost a full-time job at this point to be caught up on the day-to-day of what's happening in the space. I'm a big, every night review. One of my routines at night is to kind of review things that I've either learned this day, and I'm to a point where I can't keep up with the latest and greatest technology advancements in AI. So I think that's a big element of it, and I could go on for hours, but I'll let the other two, since I know we're already starting to get strapped for time, I'll let the other two chime in on their thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Jim, what do you want to answer to that?
When we have the AI conversation with our clients, we approach it from a few different directions. Marketers are always excited to do it. The ITs usually a little hesitant, and the leaders don't want anything to do with it at all.
Yeah.
So I try to explain the difference between generative and more assistive and more tactical AI. Firefly, or Gen AI, with its variations and its ability to spit out content, is a challenge for the legal folks because something is being created that still has to go through all the workflows of approval. And once you're at scale, there's no time for those approvals and there's no trust in the tool. However, when you look at the AP stack, more of that is assistance. It's lookalike modeling, it's segment generation, it's journey optimization. That's something a human could have done if they had the time and the bandwidth to do it. So I try to get a customer to adapt first to those things that don't feel as replacing of a human or as generative, as sometimes as obvious in the presentation that it is AI, and focus first on the value we can get in going faster and being more efficient with AI, and then take them on the journey to a Gen AI or a Firefly or more generative AI opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. That's one of the things that I always kind of thought of too, with having so many variations created in your content repository, so many variations of assets, for example, right? At what point is it too much? You polluted your repository now with so many things, right? So that's something to consider too, obviously. That's just a lot to go through.
And Adobe says they're commercially viable and they're legal to use, but it doesn't matter if the background and the foreground were pre-approved. The assembly of the elements is still something that has to be approved and still has to go through a process.
Yep, 100%. Tad, do you have anything to add to that too? Thoughts there?
Well, I mean, one is, Jim, like as an example of that, like the classic meme that you see all over the place of somebody didn't think through what their the signage on the side of their van would look like with the door slit open, and saying a cuss word on the side of it when like I approved the van, I just didn't approve the van with the door open. but on the other hand though, so on the places where Gen AI makes sense and places where it could be is because we talk a lot about things like Firefly image model or video model or something like that, and those are flashy. But you had a lot of other Gen AI that started to leak out last year. Talked a lot more about this year, stuff like generate variations and some of these experimental experience generation and stuff like that. This is where you get into something else, which is taking those things which you're not replacing a human so much as you're taking away pieces of drudgery. And this, you know, it's more alike to, you know, a craftsman who uses tools. Is he still crafting things? You know, if he's using mechanized tools and he's not, you know, carving things with his hands. To me, it's very similar. If any of you guys have done a lot of graphic design, there's a point on graphic design where you're designing and you're like, I am creating at this time. I'm busy creating. And there's sometimes some parts of your design where you're just like, I'm doing mechanical manual labor, right? Like if any of you guys have like done newsletters and stuff like that, you're not creating, you're just working. You know what I mean? That's where I think it's very similar with some of the things that have come out. We stuff like take something like generate variations, right? So if you are a content author and you've got a couple and you're going to generate layouts, generating layouts in the AEM page editor is a royal pain. Trying to think of 6 other ways that you could display this content and then generate and then to create an experiment based on that, that is a lot of work. That's just work, right? Maybe you had the idea, and now you have to work. If you had something that could do some of that for you, you're not replacing a person, you're enabling a person. And it's very similar with some of the other stuff, which I don't know if you got questions on later, Raf, I forgot, but things like the site catalyst or site catalyst, no, experience catalyst, where you're basically automating the AEM import process to get onto edge delivery services. That's something that is using AI to do something that's very brute force. And for any of us who have done edge delivery imports, where you're taking existing content and trying to stick it in edge delivery, that is a super manual process that you're throwing developers against and saying, good, take this thing, recreate it, rewrite this thing as a block. Okay, good. Remodel this thing. Good. Try it again. No, it looks terrible. Good. Try it again. No, it looks terrible. And you're doing that. And you might be doing that for months on a single client. And then it's throwaway code. It's gone. You're never going to see that code again. And you're on to the next client. That's the kind of thing where you go, can I please have a computer do that stuff for me? And I don't, you know, at that point, that's to me also where like a Firefly video model, you generate one video and you're using about as much CPU as running an AEM site for a year. I mean, that's like a ridiculous amount of processing power that it takes to do that, right? But then if you, so that, to me, that kind of stuff's hard to justify because who knows how Adobe's justifying all those costs of the data center's worth of gear that is making that, you know, animated whatever that you just made. But if you take, you know, that catalyst where you're saying, good, well, instead of having one of my developers work on this for months, I'm just going to throw this thing at this and it's going to do 7,000 Git commits until it finally pops out the import code that gets all my stuff in. I just saved months, you know? And you can financially justify something like that. If it costs a bunch of money to run that thing, but I didn't have to pay a developer for 3 months and I got a POC out the door, then, you know, it makes more sense.
Yep, 100%.
And that's where we're seeing the most, at least where we see the most use of GenAI is in the development path so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about something else too, since they had, you know, since we're on the topic of generative AI, right? So what they had done is they had basically unveiled all these different orchestration agents. So they do different things along the whole path of experience creation, analytics, right? So I'm going to ask each of you, you know, which ones sort of stood out to you or which ones you're kind of more excited about. So Jim, I'll start with you, and I'll bring up, while we're talking about it, I'll bring it up on the screen here too in just a second.
Okay. Well, I'll leave the site optimization agent for Tad. He can have it. I think the ones outside of that make me the most excited are the ones that deal with data and journeys. There's so much grunt production work that we have to do to update our audiences and to be able to optimize our journeys. To be able to leverage these agents to do that work for us, I think it's going to free up hours and hours of work. I'm still unsure what that means to an SI and an agency as far as what we have to do for configuration, optimization, or learning and training. But if these work as advertised, I can see a ton of time savings. I also love what they're saying about the journey agent because they're talking about B2B there. And we have a lot of B2B RFPs and customers coming to us for some reason right now wanting to do things better in their B2B marketing. And that specific agent is supposed to help optimize journeys for leads and accounts versus people in B2C. So those are the ones that are exciting me the most, and I can't wait till what Tad has to say.
So it's funny. I was really curious about what you were going to say about that, because it was that sort of thing that hit me watching those sessions. Because I've as somebody who doesn't deal with stuff like AJO and analytics and stuff like that on a day-to-day, kind of wish I did, because I love that stuff, but I don't. I look at how many tools that there are there, and how few marketers there usually are buttered across those tools, and how it seems like there's so much power there if you could remember to take the stuff from here and stick it into that, so that you can get 3 of those and then choose one. That sort of thing just seems like it would happen maybe on the big Deltas and Coca-Colas and stuff like that, but on the more mid-size marketing teams, it just seems less likely that they'd be able to really leverage the power of those. Right. But having some robots that you can set to work, saying, I'm giving you a bunch of data. Okay, let me categorize stuff so you have context. Now you have context. Can you generate me some experiments that I can do, or something like that?
The site optimizer one I thought was pretty interesting too, because will it do things like make recommendations that we would normally have to go in and go into logs and see what's happening to improve site performance, right? So that's the one where I'm thinking, is this going to replace, some amount of work that we do, right? At least help it. So I thought about that one.
And I was in a lab on that, and then I was talking to some of the guys who were working on that afterwards and making suggestions. So there are things that it can do now. I see what they want to do with it, and it's checking things like SEO, checking things like broken links, checking things like page speed insights, stuff like that. And that's all awesome. It's going to find things, and we're right on the cusp of it being able to do some really neat things that as a developer trying to keep track of and run a site, because that's one thing that, like Robert, like you and I, we push a site out to a customer, and a lot of times they're on the hook to basically be able to, have a massive team of our guys doing stuff from here in perpetuity, right? And ideally, you'd love them to be able to do, you'd love them to be able to be a bit more self-sufficient, which means a bit more of a skeleton crew. So what if you have a couple lead devs who are trying to keep a site up? And they're like, okay, I know that there's a whole bunch of cumulative layout shift all over this section of pages. I'm not really sure what to do about it. Okay, move on. I've got another P1 I'm dealing with. If you had something that was suggesting things like, you got some layout shift. Guess what? I could do this for you. I got a PR for you already. Can I show you this PR? And then you can just say, oh, I'll review that PR. That PR actually looks reasonable. Approve. Go. Like something like that, where again, you're telling robots what to do on that, and they're doing some helpful stuff. The agent doesn't do that right now. It can do some stuff like fix broken links. Like you can suggest links to you that should be fixed. But and you can give it access, and it can push stuff into docs for you. But it's bare bones right now. But the framework's cool. I like the idea, and I like the framework. I like the agents that they are setting to work on things. Those classes of agents are neat. It's a really neat idea. And I think that with fleshing out, that could be super powerful. I think that could take a section of drudgery that is drudgery that a website owner has to deal with, and let them move past that.
For sure. Robert, were there any ones that resonated with you?
Well, those are really great. I like the data insights agent. How many times we go through an implementation and we struggle to understand whether what we did was impactful to the business outcome that we were looking to achieve. And if you're not a daily user of CJA or tools like that give you those insights, then for you, it's unrealistic for us to be, logging in and trying to pull reports that then we glean insights from. Whereas if I could just literally ask the prompt, did I convert today higher than I converted yesterday on the conversion goals that I was looking to convert on? That's super powerful. Even for who are not necessarily the hook for the outcome itself, it is, and I think it's really cool for us to be able to have that at our fingertips and have that in a more human conversational way. I don't think the tool's at that spot yet, but I think that's where they're going, and I think that's very appealing. I'm excited about that one.
Cool. Okay, the next question I had was around edge delivery services, but we've kind of already talked a little bit about what developers need to think about in terms of rolling out edge delivery services sites. So if it's okay, I'm going to skip through the next question. Got a couple more to go. Okay, so question for Robert. Content supply chain, that's still something that Adobe has been addressing, right? Addressing the marketers' needs. They've rolled out Gen Studio for performance marketing. They're rolling out features day by day, things that we're coming across just by signing in, right? Wanted to understand, do you think that it's ready for marketers to really start cranking out campaigns and experiences? Do you think that's at maturity yet, or do you think that there's still some work to be done there?
I mean, the elements of the campaign, yes, the tool works. We have early access to it. We've, as you know, Raf, you've been a key part of that and helping to prove out brand creation guidelines and then generating content against that. The limitation, of course, is on the activation side. Where are we activating to? I don't even know if there's a roadmap item yet for Adobe. Maybe you guys know, where it's more than just on the acquisition side, because right now everything is built for customer acquisition. It's meta, it's display ads, it's banners, right? And getting people into engagement. On the engagement side, I'm really interested in how, taking the stuff that they've done in Express, taking the stuff that they're doing in Gen Studio, being able to activate to your site, right? As an example. So marketers have the capability to, with greater ease and potentially, through the use of GenAI, react more to what they're seeing as far as usage on their site. And of course, measured against the conversion goals that they're measured against. So I'm really excited. Do I think it's prime time? I mean, we're on V1, right? So I'm going to say safe bet. No, probably not yet. Right. But I was very impressed with where the technology was. I was one of those that, like, at the day of Summit, they turned on one other activation. So I'm not quite up to speed on the day to day, just every day they've released something new. But from where they were with activation in Gen Studio for performance marketing with Meta that had been unveiled, that piece, it works, right? So we were able to generate content, we're able to activate, it's great, right? So as far as prime time, it's hard for me to go out on a limb here, Raf, and say it's ready for prime time. But
okay, that's fair enough. Jim or Ted, anything to add to that? If not, I'm going to go on to my next question.
I'd agree with that. A flag I saw at Summit on quite a few products is they were pre-recording and doing voiceover more often than usual this year. So I don't know if that just meant something wasn't working or the timing was off or rehearsals were bad, but whatever the reason, that always gives me a concern with some of their products. We do have the full content supply chain working in one of our sandboxes. Gen Studio, all the AEM stuff, Workfront, pushing out to networks if we wanted. So it does work. I'm very concerned about the scale of it. I'm concerned once there's, full marketing teams in there, what's going to happen? Is it going to be performant? Is it going to be properly governed? I think that's what my concerns are more than the tech. And I'm actually thinking it might be time to find that client who wants to participate in a POC. Let's find a client that has it, and let's actually get a couple of use cases working end to end and see what it does under fire instead of, in controlled laboratories.
Yeah, we want to do the same thing, obviously. And the other thing I'd like to see too is, marketers have already worked in building out templates and all these different layouts and all these different ads, right? Can't we just bring those into Gen Studio? Like, it seems like right now we have to recreate some of those. It'd be great if we can sort of bridge that gap a little bit more too, so they have less places to go, which was what I was going to talk about next, which is they have all these different marketing tools that you have to go to do their work, right? Now there's yet another one where content needs to live, right? So, what kind of impact does that have to marketing teams? So that's kind of a big one. Anyway, so we're looking at about Q2 now. So I just wanted to get through the last two questions here, if that's all right. So Tad, I wanted to ask you this particular sneak that came up, Project Site Leap, right? So with Project Site Leap, what they're able to do is they're able to take a legacy site and then bring it into AEM, get a design, right, based on an existing website, and then try out a new design based on a mock-up. Do you see promise in that with site migrations?
I absolutely see promise in that. So Project Site Leap So that was the Sneaks name for Experience Catalyst. And that was the thing that kind of shocked me about this year's Sneaks. Not only was it a great Sneaks, and it was great having somebody actually intelligent and comedic on the stage, because that was some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen.
It was also very adult.
It was very adult. Yes, don't have your kids watch that. But no. So to your question, it's totally gonna have usage, and it's especially for things like POCs or things like where you've got a whole mess of whatever legacy blog posts back to 2012 that need to go into edge delivery, and they've all got different designs and stuff. And you're like, okay, I gave my estimate of this project based on this new design, and you sure we can't get rid of that? No, we have to keep it. Okay, cool. That's the stuff you just go and say, good. All this stuff, 5 different templates, make it look kind of like this, fire it well, Commander, and then and bring it in. That's something that I would love an LLM to do. I have not gotten a chance to put my hands on it yet. So,
I'm not as familiar with it. Is it Lovable and Vercel for AEM? Is that all it is? Is that
what it is? Essentially is so you're familiar with the AEM import scripts for edge delivery?
Yeah.
So there was just walls of JavaScript you write to just go and isolate divs and stuff on an existing site and bring it over. It's essentially going and it's throwing an LLM against that, saying, take this design, write those scripts, repeatedly make git commits and preview it until it looks like the thing. And it'll take whatever, some number of hours to be able to get something right. So it's obviously not fast because it's having to transit a Git repo for every single one of those and publish it out to Helix. But the thing is that's essentially the meat version of that is what we're doing right now, is of a programmer doing that. So having an LM do that, I think that's amazing. Now that doesn't replace stuff like, okay, good. Somebody making maintainable code that you can say, well, this article list is going to have what kinds of content in this article list? Well, let's make one block so you don't have 50 blocks for that kind of a thing. That's for humans to figure out and make intelligent, maintainable choices for the code. But for other stuff like that, I totally think it has use.
Yeah. I remember the day where anytime there was a site migration, you had to basically estimate out a minimum of 6 months, right? That's always what migrations consisted of. There was just a lot of work behind that.
Yep.
So Jim, what do you think of that too? What do you think of the promise of that if it's a thing?
If it's a thing, but it reminds me of, wasn't it several years ago, if you have a folder of HTML, you can drop it in this magic spot in Author and it would build you a website. And that never saw the light of day, or at least nobody ever used it.
Landing page,
so,
it was called?
Yes.
Yeah.
I worry they're created another thing that's a good demo, but I don't know how practical it is in reality for some of our larger clients.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that's kind of TBD, but we'll learn more about it. Yeah. Okay, Robert, so one of the last questions I've got here around the new offerings that they have, Commerce as a cloud service and Commerce Optimizer. What do you see as far as those and what kinds of impacts they'll have to organizations and their existing platforms? Because obviously commerce is a little bit of a behemoth, right? It's one of those big things. It was Magento back in the day, and then there was integrations and now getting on a cloud. You got SaaS offerings. Now we got these 2 offerings, and its storefront is run by Edge Delivery Services by default, right? So I'm just wondering what do we think with that? Like, do customers need to move to that now? Kind of like how we would recommend customers being on premise going to AEM as a cloud service. Is it the same thing, right? So just wanted to hear your thoughts around the commerce offerings that they got now.
Yeah, I'm generally excited about the direction. I think it is a stepping stone into getting off of the current architecture. I do also think that it allows us to compartmentalize the elements of commerce that fit nicely into the composable architecture landscape. So today, right, to consider Adobe Commerce as an element of your composable architecture, there's a lot of redundancy because of what the commerce engine itself does and can do for you. So, and we see a lot of customers moving away from utilizing, of course, the commerce templates and owning the glass and doing more headless commerce, which of course with with Commerce API, with the Commerce API mesh that we're fans of, that allows us to just use the commerce for what it's really good at: pricing rules, shipping rules, processing the transaction, basically handling cart and checkout processes, and not necessarily anymore in that hybrid fashion that we used to constantly talk about, where AEM owns the shop experience and commerce owns the buy experience. And so I think if you think about the progression here where we are, it's just a natural stepping stone into where they're going with commerce as a CS and commerce optimizer. And it's a part way for Adobe to eventually not have to sell the full gambit and still offer commerce as an important part of the customer experience when that's a requirement. And so I'm excited about it. As part of this with edge delivery, I'm interested to see how that evolves as well. Not just because of the storefront piece of that, which obviously is compelling, but it does force you to go down that path to write blocks in ES script and not necessarily in your favorite framework. And I am wondering, I don't know if guys on the call know, but if eventually edge delivery will be optimized in a way that allows for those frameworks to be used, knowing that, when you go down that path of utilizing those frameworks, it's harder to quote unquote, declare that you are the fastest and are on the fastest option available. So anyway, I know that's a kind of a long-winded answer, and there's a lot there to unpack, but generally speaking, you asked if I was a fan of the direction that they're taking, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, cool. Jim, Tad, how about you?
Definitely a fan. Glad to see less reliance on Luma, older technologies, and all their APIs being upgraded. Timing is bad, as tomorrow morning I pitch a client on Adobe Commerce, and I'm using all the old language and talking headless and Next.js, and about a week later, if we get down selected, I got to turn around and say, well, our price could be valid, but most of what I put on those slides is no longer true if we go down the path of Commerce Optimizer and other newer announcements. So timing's always interesting, but I think finally Adobe Commerce is becoming a player again and can compete with some of the other commerce platforms. And I'm very happy to see it.
Yeah. Ted, how about you?
I think it also, to what you're saying, Robert, too, I think it makes gives you a path for some of the redundancy to go away and to make things be used for what they're best for. Because one of the problems with redundancy, but also not fully using some of these things for what they're for, is kind of exacerbated by all the stuff like plugin in GenStudio and an explosion of content. Because, for example, if you got a commerce implementation, you have a bunch of different places where you could potentially put any given asset. So, or a bunch of different places where any given experience fragment or chunk of content could go. And one of the things with the way that Adobe's going to market with Commerce Cloud Services, you get edge delivery, and you get the Commerce Cloud, SaaS, and you get assets to be able to store all your product data in. Mm-hmm. And so at that point too, so then you could say, oh, well, I guess we just stick the whole site on edge delivery and stick all our stuff in assets. And anybody, wanted to piece that together, say, oh, it's a great idea, but we've been trying to do all this time. Because like that wonderful speaker from Marriott was saying that there's all this AI stuff that's flashy as heck, but the real sexy thing is taxonomy and getting to have everything in a place that really makes sense where you can find it later. And so some of these deeply unsexy releases that they were talking about at Summit, like adding in semantic search capability into AEM, tokenizing everything in the asset repository. So even if it came in as DSCF009.jpg, you've got something that you're looking for, Blue Boat, then you get it. And so, or Blue Boat in Chicago,
right?
You get stuff like that. So So things like that, where you can place things, find things, not duplicate things. And when you have a ridiculous explosion of generative content, it just becomes all the more important that your foundation's in order.
Yeah, really good point. Okay, so that was the last question. I wanted to make sure that we had a couple of minutes where I can fire off my rapid fire questions, and then we got a question in the Q&A as well. Okay, so the rapid fire questions, they could be pretty quick, but try to keep them less than maybe 20, 30 seconds. I'm going to start with Jim. Okay, here goes. If marketing buzzwords were banned, what's the first word you'd accidentally say?
Transformation.
Nice, good. Okay, Robert, you've got 30 seconds to explain headless CMS to your grandma. Go.
Oh my gosh. To my grandmother? To my grandmother, or the quintessential grandmother?
Quintessential, sure.
Yeah. Gosh. Man, I'm at a loss for words. I don't know if I can. I don't know.
That's okay. We can skip it. Okay. Tad, what's more terrifying, an untested AEM deployment on a Friday night or open mic night?
Do I get to pick the song?
Sure.
Okay, good. If I get to pick the song, then I'll do the open mic night. But yeah, because untested AEM deployments are a terror.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Okay, Jim, if AEM core components were people at a party, which one would be the life of the party?
Well, it would have to be the rich text editor because it can do so much and hold so many conversations.
Yeah, I was thinking the multi-field, either multi-field or the accordion. Too. Okay, Robert.
I was gonna say the accordion. Yeah.
Robert, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen AI generate?
The weirdest thing. Yeah. Monkeys on a bicycle in the mountain, just stuff like that.
Yeah. Ted, I remember you had an experience where you asked it, what is the freezing temperature of water? And it came up with some weird number that wasn't 32 degrees.
Oh yeah. It was like so there's one precise answer that it wouldn't give. And it was like if you said, what will happen if you how long will it take to chill, to freeze water at the temperature of 29 degrees? And it'll be like, it will never freeze, or something like that. It was like, it confidently said, oh yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay, Ted, here's one for you. Describe your job in a way that would impress a Gen Zer, and bonus points if you use Gen Z terms like sus or brain rot.
Do you know what? So, okay. The only thing is, the only thing that's impressed my kids ever is that they think I'm famous because we went to Europe and people knew me. So that's the only thing. That's the only thing. Otherwise, they want nothing to do with my job.
Totally fair. All right, Jim, here's one for you. What's harder, debugging AEM permissions or explaining blockchain to your parents? And again, bonus points if you use boomer terms like bummer or back in my day.
Well, I think back in their day, blockchain would make absolutely no sense to them. So I probably would try to explain permissions, because I think you could find terms that apply, whereas blockchain is unexplainable.
I can attest. I recently tried to explain blockchain to a 70-plus-year-old, and they just couldn't.
Yeah,
just couldn't comprehend it.
Yep. Okay, Robert, here's one for you. What's your favorite AEM feature that makes you feel like a wizard in a coding robe?
Honestly, probably the difference editor. To be honest, one of my favorites to go to the difference editor and show people the magic of what was once and now what once is, and it was your fault. You were the one who did that. Yeah.
Okay, Ted, one more for you here.
Launches too is another one, by the way.
What's your favorite AEM shortcut that feels like a cheat code?
AEM shortcut that feels like a cheat code? I mean, the sorry answer is restarting.
I'm gonna say slash. Like any time I'm somewhere in AEM, I just hit slash and I can just bring up the search and it's contextual. I do like that one.
That's a good
okay. Sorry, that was the ops guy in me that answered.
No problem at all. Okay, well, that's our rapid fire questions. There was a question in Q&A. Let me get to that one real quickly. Okay, this is by Eric. So for new EDS implementations, are there any good reasons to still use Crosswalk as opposed to DA, knowing that DA offers the best of both doc and universal editor authoring? He's got an example. Does Crosswalk still solve multi-site manager requirements better than DA?
Who's it for? Sorry.
For the group, anybody who can answer or wants to answer.
I mean,
we just tried to make these things work in the same environment. We could not get them to work in the same environment. Doc authoring with universal editor. So we need to actually reach out to the engineers because it's a problem that we're not able to solve. But they claim, and there's documentation that claims that it does support both, but we weren't able to get it to work. This is literally as of 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah, Crosswalk is kind of a tricky one, that I know, but in DA, they are becoming more and more feature parity with multi-site management, right? They've got ways that you can create locales, and they create the structures for you, and they're like live copies, and they got configuration. So I think they're getting there.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that was one of the, so our last customer that we launched, it was because of the immaturity of the way that a Crosswalk implementation would handle multiple locales that we ended up with DA. And but yeah, we got locales, we got languages, we got translation, we got rollout, and it's a lot better. I mean, for me, so is there a reason to still use Crosswalk? There's that, but there's also, is there a reason to still use SharePoint or something like that? Because at this point, DA is mature enough, and it's such a slick solution that solves for things like rollout without the need for a roll your own and figuring out your own workflow engine and stuff like that. That I think it's super powerful. That I'm very happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, cool, awesome. That was the only question I saw in there. I think that brings us to the end of the session, but let me just go through the rest of my slides that I've got here. So thank you everyone on the panel too. These were great answers to these questions, great insights. I just wanted to point everybody to a couple of things. There's some upcoming events that are happening. One of them is the AEMUG one, which is run by Adobe. So that's Mastering Cache for Optimal Page Performance. That's coming up on the 16th. And we've got a Woman in Tech session as well, which is establishing and maintaining metadata and AEM assets for GenAI readiness. Wow, that one sounds really cool too. So definitely check out those sessions. And then this is the AEM Midwest chapter. We've got a space there. We usually try to host these probably about once a quarter. Looking forward to getting one set up for the summer. Reach out to me if you want to try to help with coordinating that, facilitating that, coming up with some of the topics. I'd love to hear. We've also got a new co-host too. So Madan Rajabal is also on the call. So he's going to help out with facilitating some of these sessions. And I think that is it. So thanks everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now.